At the bar, a homeless girl came up to me and asked, "Can you put that drink down and call an ambulance?" She looked maybe 19 with matted brown hair and clothes that had seen better days. I set down my beer thinking someone really needed help. Because that's what you do when someone asks for an ambulance. You help. Or at least that's what I thought. She pulled me toward the exit talking fast about her friend overdosing. Said they were in an abandoned building around the corner. My drunk brain wasn't firing on all cylinders, but I knew enough to start dialing 911 as we walked. The operator asked for our location, but the girl kept pulling me forward saying we needed to hurry. Led me down an alley between two warehouses. I should have felt uneasy, but all I could think about was someone dying while I wasted time being paranoid. The building she stopped at looked like it had been empty for years. Boards covered most of the windows and graffiti tagged every surface. She pushed through a gap in the plywood covering what used to be a loading dock. I followed, still trying to give the 911 operator our location, but the signal was getting weak. Inside smelled like mold and piss. Our footsteps echoed in the darkness until she pulled out a small flashlight. The beam showed debris everywhere. Old furniture, trash, needles. Exactly the kind of place someone might overdose. "Up here. We need to go up the stairs." She pointed the light at a staircase that looked ready to collapse. That's when my brain finally kicked in properly. We were alone in an abandoned building. No sounds of anyone in distress. No friend calling for help. Just me following a stranger into increasingly dangerous territory. Every true crime podcast I'd ever listened to started exactly like this. I stopped at the bottom of the stairs. Told her I'd wait here for the paramedics to arrive. Give them directions when they showed up. But she grabbed my wrist again with those surprisingly strong fingers. Said her friend was too heavy for her to carry down alone. Said he was turning blue. The 911 operator was asking questions, but the call kept cutting out. 1 bar of signal. Then none. I looked at the girl's face in the flashlight beam, trying to decide if she was lying. I took 1 step up the stairs, telling myself I'd just look. Just confirm someone actually needed help, then get out. At the top was a long hallway with doors on either side. Most were missing or hanging off their hinges. She directed me to one at the far end. Every instinct screamed this was wrong. But what if someone really was dying while I hesitated? The room she indicated was darker than the rest. I stepped inside, straining to see or hear any sign of a person in distress. That's when I felt the sharp pain in my upper arm. Like a bee sting, but worse. I spun around to see the girl pulling a syringe away from me. "What did you—" The words came out slurred already. My legs went rubbery. The phone slipped from my hand and clattered on the floor. She watched me with those same wide eyes, but the panic was gone, replaced by something cold and calculating. I tried to grab her, but my arms wouldn't work right. The last thing I remembered was hitting the ground hard, the taste of dirt and rust in my mouth, her going through my pockets with practiced efficiency. Then nothing. I woke up to sunlight stabbing through my eyelids. My head felt like someone had used it for batting practice. Every muscle ached and my mouth tasted like death. It took a minute to realize I was naked, completely naked on a filthy mattress in that same abandoned room. My clothes were gone, wallet, keys, everything except my phone, which sat on the floor just out of reach. Why had she left that? I crawled over to it, seeing missed calls and texts. My girlfriend Kenna had sent a dozen messages, getting increasingly worried. The most recent one made my blood freeze. "Honey, why is there a girl at our front door?" I fumbled to call her back to tell her not to open the door, but my hands were shaking too bad. Another text came through, this time with a photo. The girl from last night standing on our porch. Same matted hair, same wide eyes, but now she was wearing my clothes and holding my keys. Kenna's next message was just 3 words that made my stomach drop. I let her in. My fingers fumbled with the phone, trying to hit Kenna's number again. The screen kept sliding under my shaking thumb. Finally got it to dial. The ringing seemed to last forever. Then she picked up, but all I heard was screaming. Not words, just pure panic. Something crashed in the background. Glass breaking. Then the line went dead. I tried calling back, but it went straight to voicemail. My whole body was shaking now from cold and fear and whatever that girl had shot into me. Had to get help. Dialed 911 with numb fingers. The operator answered on the second ring. "Please help, my girlfriend is in danger at our apartment." My voice came out rough and cracked. "Sir, we already have units responding to that address." The operator's voice was calm but urgent. Multiple neighbors called about a disturbance. "Can you tell me your location?" I looked around the filthy room, trying to think. I'm in an abandoned building. I was drugged. The girl who did it is at my apartment with my girlfriend. The operator started asking more questions, but I couldn't focus. My teeth were chattering so hard I could barely talk. Still naked and freezing on this disgusting mattress. Had to get out of here. Had to get to Kenna. I crawled off the mattress and started searching the room for anything to cover myself. Broken glass everywhere, cutting into my knees. Found some old newspapers, but they fell apart when I touched them. A pile of trash in the corner had a blue tarp stuffed under it. Moldy and stiff, but better than nothing. I shook it out, sending dust and God knows what else flying. Wrapped it around my waist like the world's worst toga. The plastic was cold and stuck to my skin. My legs barely worked as I stumbled toward the door. Had to use the wall to stay upright. The hallway stretched out forever. Each step felt like walking through mud. Made it to the stairs and almost fell down them. Grabbed the railing, which groaned under my weight. 1 step at a time. The tarp kept slipping and I had to hold it with one hand. Down to the 2nd floor. Then the 1st. The loading dock entrance was just a bright rectangle of daylight that hurt to look at. Pushed through into the alley. The concrete was freezing under my bare feet. Sharp bits of gravel dug into my soles. I shuffled toward the street holding the wall for support. Must have looked insane. Naked guy wrapped in plastic stumbling out of an abandoned building. A siren got louder and an ambulance pulled up at the mouth of the alley. The paramedic jumped out and ran toward me. Sir, are you okay? We got a call about a possible overdose. He grabbed my arm to steady me. Not overdose. Was drugged. Girl with brown hair. She's at my apartment. The words came out jumbled. He helped me toward the ambulance talking into his radio. We have a male victim showing signs of drug-related assault. Requesting police backup. The back of the ambulance was warm and bright. He wrapped a real blanket around me and started checking my pulse. What's your name, sir? Had to think about it for a second. Told him. He shined a light in my eyes. Do you know what you were given? I shook my head. Needle in my arm. Woke up like this. He nodded and kept working. The ambulance started moving. We're taking you to the hospital. Police will meet us there. The ride was a blur of medical questions and vital signs. At the emergency room, they wheeled me straight back. Nurse Conrad introduced himself as he helped me onto a bed. His hands were gentle as he took my temperature and blood pressure. We need to do a full talk screen to see what's in your system. He explained each step as he drew blood. This will help us treat you and give the police evidence. The needle going in made me flinch, remembering the girl's syringe. He labeled the vials carefully and sent them to the lab. The doctor will be in soon, but you're stable. Try to rest. But I couldn't rest. Kept checking my phone for news about Kenna. 20 minutes passed like hours. Then Officer Pena walked in with a notebook. I'm Officer Pena. I need to take your statement. She pulled up a chair next to the bed. First thing. Your girlfriend is safe. She's shaken up but not hurt. We're bringing her here now. Relief hit me so hard I almost threw up. The girl. Did you catch her? Officer Pena shook her head. She fled when she heard our sirens, but we have good descriptions from neighbors. Can you tell me what happened? I started from the beginning. The bar, the fake overdose story, following her to the building, the needle, waking up naked. She wrote everything down, asking careful questions. This matches other cases we've been tracking. You're lucky you got out. I nodded. Before she could say more, Kenna burst through the curtain. Her face was red and puffy from crying. I'm so sorry, I'm so sorry. She grabbed my hand, squeezing tight. I thought it was you in different clothes. She had your keys. I pulled her close, not caring about the tarp or the blanket or how I must smell. Not your fault. She tricked us both. Kenna was shaking as she talked. She went straight to the bedroom, started pulling out drawers, throwing things around. I asked what was wrong and she just kept searching. Then the neighbors started banging on the door about the noise and she ran. Officer Pena took notes while Kenna talked. The doctor came in with test results. Your blood work shows a heavy dose of benzodiazepines. Probably Rohypnol or something similar. He looked at his tablet, scrolling through results. Mixed with something else we can't identify yet. You're very lucky. This combination could have stopped your breathing. He explained that I'd need to stay for observation, but should recover fully. Detective Rivera arrived while the doctor was talking. Older guy with gray hair and tired eyes. He introduced himself and pulled up another chair. This is the 4th case like this in 2 months. He showed us photos on his phone. Same pattern every time. Young woman claims someone's overdosing. He asked detailed questions about the girl's appearance and behavior. We think she's working with others. Someone has to be fencing the stolen goods. He looked at Kenna. What did she take from your apartment? Kenna listed what she knew was missing. Your laptop for sure. My jewelry box. She went through all our important papers, but I don't know what she took from those. Detective Rivera nodded and made notes. We'll need a full inventory when you get home. Check your credit cards and bank accounts immediately. He stood to leave, giving us his card. We're going to catch her. In the meantime, change all your locks and passwords. The curtain pulled back and Luke Murphy from our building walked in holding his phone up like he'd found gold. Luke lived 2 doors down from us and had one of those video doorbells he was always showing off at building meetings. He pushed past the detective and showed me his screen where a grainy video was playing. There she was walking out of our building's front entrance wearing my jacket and jeans, while carrying 2 of our canvas shopping bags that looked stuffed full. The timestamp showed 45 minutes after Kenna's last text to me. Luke scrolled to another clip showing her trying different keys at the mailbox bank in our lobby before giving up and leaving. The detective took Luke's phone and started forwarding the videos to himself while asking Luke questions about the building's other cameras. Kenna squeezed my hand harder, watching the girl on screen wearing my clothes like she owned them. The doctor came back to say I could leave, but needed to take it easy for the next few days and watch for any delayed reactions to whatever drug cocktail she'd given me. They gave me a set of scrubs to wear home since my clothes were evidence now, and Kenna helped me stand up on legs that still felt wobbly. The ride back to our apartment took 20 minutes, but felt like hours with both of us staring at every person on the sidewalk, wondering if they were connected to this somehow. Our building's front door had new scratches around the lock that hadn't been there yesterday. Inside our apartment looked like a tornado had hit with drawers pulled out and papers scattered across the floor. The bedroom was the worst, with our mattress flipped over and the closet completely ransacked. Our small safe sat in the corner with scratch marks all around the dial where she'd tried to pry it open, but the thing had held. Kenna started picking things up, then stopped and took photos of everything first for insurance while I called the locksmith the detective had recommended. The guy showed up within an hour and started drilling out our locks while explaining these new ones couldn't be picked or bumped like the old ones. He changed the deadbolt and the doorknob and even put a chain lock on for extra security, then moved on to the windows to check those locks too. While he worked, we went through everything trying to figure out what was missing. My laptop was gone, along with Kenna's jewelry box and both our passports from the filing cabinet. She'd taken our checkbook and a folder of tax documents that had our social security numbers on them. The locksmith finished and handed us 5 copies of the new keys, saying we should give one to the building manager, but nobody else for now. Detective Rivera called while we were still cataloging the damage to say they'd pulled the bar's security footage and could see the whole interaction clearly. He needed me at the station tomorrow morning to look through photos of known associates who might be working with Ashley since she rarely operated alone. That night, neither of us could settle down, with Kenna getting up every 10 minutes to check the locks and peer out the peephole. Every footstep in the hallway made us both freeze and listen. A door slammed somewhere and Kenna grabbed the baseball bat we'd pulled out of the closet. We tried watching TV but couldn't focus and ended up just lying there in the dark listening to every sound the building made. Around 3 in the morning, a car alarm went off outside, and we both shot upright with our hearts pounding. Sleep wasn't happening, so we made coffee and sat at the kitchen table going through our credit card statements online. The next morning, I took an Uber to the police station since I still felt shaky driving. The building smelled like burnt coffee and floor cleaner. Detective Rivera met me at the front desk and led me to a small room with a computer. He pulled up a database and started showing me mugshots one after another. The 5th photo made me stop. There she was with the same matted brown hair, but in this picture her eyes looked dead and hollow. Her name was Ashley Marie Brennan, and she had arrests going back 3 years for theft and drug possession. The detective printed out her information and explained she usually worked with 2 or 3 others who helped fence the stolen goods through pawn shops and online marketplaces. They were checking every pawn shop in a 20-mile radius with our serial numbers. While I was at the station, my phone rang showing my bank's fraud department. They'd detected suspicious charges at 3 different ATMs, all trying to withdraw the maximum amount. The charges happened at 2 in the morning at machines across town from each other. They were freezing my accounts immediately and would send new cards by overnight mail, but I needed to come in to sign paperwork. After the bank, I called my boss from the parking lot to explain why I hadn't shown up for 2 days. He listened to the whole story, then said he understood, but HR would need an official police report to approve any paid leave. Without that, I'd have to use my vacation days or take unpaid time. I told him I'd get the report from Detective Rivera and email it by the end of the day. Back at the apartment, Kenna had gotten a call from our credit card company about charges at an electronics store for $2,000 worth of gaming equipment. She'd already disputed them, and they said the charges would be reversed within 5 business days, but we needed to fill out fraud forms. Luke texted me more doorbell footage he'd found from 3 days before the attack, showing Ashley standing outside our building watching people come and go. She'd been planning this for a while and studying our patterns. Detective Rivera called again to say they'd found some of our items at a pawn shop downtown, where someone matching Ashley's description had sold them yesterday. The shop owner, Tiago Marston, had already been questioned and claimed he didn't know the items were stolen, but they were checking his story. The credit card company called back an hour later to confirm all the fraudulent charges had been reversed, and our account was secure again, though we'd need to get new cards and update any automatic payments we had set up. Detective Rivera called that afternoon while I was still sorting through bank paperwork to tell me Tiago Marston from a pawn shop across town had contacted him about my laptop. Someone matching Ashley's description had tried to sell it yesterday afternoon, but got spooked when Tiago asked for ID and left without completing the sale. The detective wanted me to come down to the station to verify the serial number matched what I'd reported stolen. I grabbed my jacket and headed for the door when Kenna stopped me and asked where I was going without telling her first. I explained about the pawn shop, but she started yelling that I should have asked her to come with me instead of just leaving. The stress finally boiled over, and we had our first real fight about everything that had happened. She blamed me for being too trusting and following some random girl into an abandoned building like an idiot. I snapped back that she was the one who actually let Ashley into our apartment even after seeing the weird texts. We went back and forth for 20 minutes with both of us saying things we didn't really mean until finally Kenna started crying and I felt like the worst person alive. We sat on the couch not talking for a while before I apologized, and she did too, and we agreed we were both just scared and taking it out on each other. The next day, Detective Rivera called with more news about the investigation. They'd found medical waste records from a pharmacy near that abandoned building showing someone had bought needles recently. The buyer paid cash, but the pharmacy's security camera caught them clearly, and it looked like Ashley with a man they were trying to identify. Our landlord showed up that afternoon to discuss the security upgrades we'd been demanding. He complained about the cost of new cameras and better locks, but eventually agreed to install them after I mentioned we might have to break our lease due to safety concerns if he didn't. The work would start next week and include cameras at all entrances plus new deadbolts on every apartment. Detective Rivera sent over the bar's security footage for me to review, and it clearly showed Ashley approaching me at the bar. The bartender had already given a statement saying she'd been hanging around for hours before I arrived, nursing the same drink and watching everyone who came in. The footage showed her waiting until I was alone at the bar, then making her move with that whole panic act about needing help. Watching it made me feel sick seeing how calculated everything was. That night, I woke up at 3 in the morning with my heart racing and my whole body shaking. I couldn't catch my breath and thought I was having a heart attack, but Kenna recognized it as a panic attack. It lasted about 10 minutes with me sitting on the bathroom floor trying to breathe normally while she rubbed my back. The next day, I called the hospital, and they said panic attacks and shaking episodes were common after being drugged like I was. They referred me to a counselor who specialized in trauma and could see me next week. The attacks kept happening randomly over the next few days, sometimes triggered by nothing at all. Detective Rivera called with interesting news about another victim coming forward. Maggie Buckner had seen a news story about our case and contacted him because Ashley had done the exact same thing to her 3 months ago. Same story about an overdosing friend, same abandoned building, same drug injection, and same identity theft afterward. Maggie was willing to testify if they caught Ashley, which would strengthen the case significantly. That evening, Kenna brought up the idea of moving to a new apartment somewhere Ashley didn't know about. I understood why she felt unsafe here, but I didn't want to let Ashley drive us from our home. We talked about it for a long time with Kenna saying she couldn't sleep knowing Ashley had been in our apartment and knew where we lived. I promised to think about it, but really hoped the new security measures would be enough to make her feel safe again. The credit monitoring service called the next morning about someone trying to open a store credit account at a major retailer using my social security number. The fraud alert we'd placed caught it immediately and blocked the application, but it showed Ashley, or whoever she was working with, was still trying to use my information. I had to call the store's fraud department and go through the whole story again while they flagged my information in their system. Detective Rivera had the best news yet when he called that afternoon about the pawn shop surveillance footage. The cameras had gotten a clear shot of Ashley's face when she tried to sell my laptop. But more importantly, she was with a man who was already in their database. The guy had multiple arrests for fencing stolen goods, and they were bringing him in for questioning. With 2 clear identifications and a known associate to pressure, the detective felt confident they were close to finding Ashley. The next morning, I went down to check our storage unit in the basement since I hadn't been there since before the attack. The lock was still on the door, but something felt wrong about how it was positioned. I opened it and my stomach dropped when I saw the mess inside. Our camping gear was gone, including the expensive tent we'd bought for our anniversary trip. The old laptop I kept for backup files was missing along with a box of electronics we'd been meaning to sell. She must have gone through everything because boxes were opened and dumped everywhere. I took photos of the damage and called Detective Rivera, who said this was common with identity thieves looking for documents or things to sell. Back upstairs, my phone rang with my boss asking when I'd be coming back to work. I'd been out for almost a week now, and while he understood what happened, he needed to know my timeline. I told him I needed a few more days, but the truth was, I couldn't afford much more unpaid leave. My sick days were used up and the bills kept coming whether I was working or not. The hospital called that afternoon with my final lab results, and the news made me feel sick all over again. The injection contained a mix of benzos and something called GHB that could have easily killed me at that dose. The doctor said most people wouldn't have been able to walk out of that building on their own. She was amazed I'd managed to get to the street and find help considering what was in my system. Detective Rivera called with an update about finding where Ashley had been staying. They'd located an encampment under the highway where other homeless people knew her as Haley. Everyone there said she'd been acting desperate lately, more aggressive than usual and talking about needing money fast. The detective thought she might owe someone dangerous, which would explain the escalation in her crimes. That night, Kenna and I had a long talk about what to do next. She wanted to move, but I didn't want to run from our own home. We decided to stay but install our own security system on top of what the landlord was doing. We ordered cameras for inside the apartment and a doorbell camera that would alert our phones if anyone approached. The next day, Detective Rivera called about something concerning. A rideshare driver had come forward after seeing Ashley's photo on the news. He remembered dropping someone matching her description near Kenna's workplace last week before any of this started. Now we had to worry she'd been stalking us, planning this whole thing for who knows how long. Kenna wanted to take time off work but couldn't afford it either. That evening, we got into our first real fight about Ashley and what drove her to this. Kenna saw her as just a criminal who chose to hurt people for money. I kept thinking about the desperation in those camps and wondered if the system had failed her first. We went to bed angry at each other for the first time since this started. The next morning, I woke up to text messages from 3 different unknown numbers. One mentioned my mother's maiden name, which was in our documents. Another referenced the name of my first pet, which I'd used as a security question for various accounts. The third asked if I still lived at our old address from 2 years ago. Detective Rivera said to screenshot everything and change all my security questions immediately. He explained Ashley probably sold our information to other criminals who were now fishing for more details. The detective also told me they'd set up surveillance at the pawn shop since Ashley seemed to return there regularly to sell stolen goods. They had undercover officers rotating shifts hoping to catch her during another sale attempt. He felt confident they'd get her soon since she was running out of places to fence stolen items. Later that day, he called again with good news about strengthening the case. He'd shown Maggie the same photo lineup I'd looked at, and she'd identified Ashley immediately. Having 2 victims who could testify would make the charges much more serious when they caught her. The prosecutor would be able to show a pattern of behavior rather than a single incident. Maggie also remembered additional details about her attack that matched mine perfectly, including the exact words Ashley used about her friend overdosing. The similarities were too specific to be coincidence, which proved Ashley had done this multiple times before. I spent the rest of the day trying to focus on work emails from home, but kept jumping every time my phone buzzed. Kenna texted that she'd seen someone who looked like Ashley near her building's parking garage, but security said it was just another homeless woman asking for change. We were both so paranoid now that every thin woman with brown hair made our hearts race. The security system installation couldn't happen fast enough, and I found myself checking the locks constantly, even though we'd already changed them. That night, neither of us slept well despite the new deadbolt and chair wedged under the doorknob. Every noise from the hallway made us freeze and listen, wondering if she'd somehow gotten into the building again. The detective had assured us she was probably laying low now that her photo was everywhere, but that didn't stop the anxiety. I kept thinking about those text messages and wondering how many other criminals now had our information floating around. The next morning, Detective Rivera called, and I told him straight up that I wasn't going to just sit around being a victim while they handled everything. He actually seemed to respect that, and said he'd keep me in the loop as much as he could legally share. 2 days later, he called back with some background on Ashley that made things make more sense. She'd been in a treatment program 6 months ago run by a social worker named Bonnie Welsh, who said Ashley had shown real promise before leaving early and disappearing. Bonnie explained Ashley had been clean for almost 3 months in the program and was working on getting her life together when something triggered a relapse and she took off. The detective thought knowing this might help us understand what we were dealing with, even if it didn't excuse what she'd done to us. I spent the whole next morning at our dining table sorting through every single document we owned, trying to get everything organized for the bank and credit agencies and insurance companies. Birth certificates and social security cards and tax returns and bank statements all spread out in neat piles while I made lists of what needed to be reported where. My hand cramped from filling out fraud affidavit forms and identity theft reports and credit freeze requests. Kenna brought me coffee and sandwiches while I worked through lunch making phone calls to every company that might have our information on file. By 3 o'clock, I had a stack of certified mail envelopes ready to send, and my brain felt like mush from dealing with automated phone systems and hold music. Detective Rivera called that afternoon about the pawn shop surveillance they'd set up after Tiago reported Ashley had been there multiple times. They had undercover officers watching the place and were ready to grab her the next time she showed up. The next morning around 11, the detective called again, and I could hear the frustration in his voice. Ashley had walked right up to the pawn shop door, but must have sensed something was off because she turned around at the last second and disappeared into the crowd before the officers could react. They'd been so close, and now she was spooked and probably wouldn't go back there again. Meanwhile, the locksmith finished installing our new deadbolts, and the security company got all our cameras up and running. We had cameras covering the front door and hallway and living room, and even one in the bedroom that we could check from our phones. The apartment felt like a prison with all the new locks and cameras, but at least we could sleep without jumping at every sound. I called my boss that afternoon to talk about coming back to work, and explained I was still dealing with panic attacks and couldn't focus properly yet. He was more understanding than I expected, and offered to let me work from home 3 days a week until I felt ready to come back to the office full-time. It was a huge relief knowing I wouldn't lose my job on top of everything else. 3 days later, I was working on my laptop at home when Detective Rivera called with the news we'd been waiting for. Ashley had been arrested trying to shoplift from a pharmacy across town, and the responding officer recognized her from the bulletin that had been sent to all units. She was finally in custody, and they were processing her at the station. The detective said they'd recovered some of our stuff from the backpack she had when they arrested her, including Kenna's grandmother's necklace and my college ring, though most of our electronics had already been sold. They also found syringes in her bag that matched the type of medical waste she'd purchased from that pharmacy near the abandoned building based on their records. During questioning with her public defender present, Ashley admitted to drugging and robbing me and breaking into our apartment, but claimed someone else had planned the whole thing and forced her to do it. The detective said she was clearly going through withdrawal in the holding cell and kept changing her story about who this other person was and how they'd made her do it. Her lawyer was trying to argue she wasn't competent to be questioned in her current state, but the prosecutor said they had enough evidence either way. 2 weeks after her arrest, I got a call from the bank saying they were officially closing the fraud investigation in our favor. Every penny that had been stolen had been returned to our account, and they'd removed all the fraud markers from our credit report. The woman on the phone said we shouldn't see any long-term effects on our credit score, and they'd put extra monitoring on our accounts for the next 2 years just to be safe. It felt like we could finally start to breathe again knowing the financial part was resolved, even though the criminal case was still moving forward. 3 days later, I sat in the doctor's office while he went through my blood test results page by page. Everything came back normal, and he said the drugs were completely out of my system with no lasting damage to my liver or kidneys. The counselor I'd been seeing twice a week helped me work through the panic attacks without making me feel weak for having them. She taught me breathing exercises and grounding techniques that actually worked when I felt that tight feeling in my chest. Detective Rivera called while I was leaving the counselor's office to tell me Ashley's public defender was pushing for a plea deal. Instead of prison time, she'd go into a court-ordered treatment program for 18 months with regular drug tests and check-ins. The detective wanted to know if Kenna and I were okay with that arrangement since we were the victims. I told him I'd talk to Kenna and get back to him. And that night, Kenna and I sat on the couch for 3 hours talking about everything that had happened. We agreed we needed better communication and decided to start seeing a couples counselor together. We also set up weekly check-ins where we'd talk about how we were really feeling instead of pretending everything was fine. The counselor we found specialized in trauma and helped us understand how this whole thing had affected us differently. Kenna felt violated that someone had been in our home while I kept replaying that night in the abandoned building. 4 weeks passed and our apartment started feeling normal again. We'd bought new throw pillows and moved the furniture around, and the security cameras just became part of the background. The new locks were solid, and we both had copies of all the keys. I stopped checking the cameras obsessively, and Kenna stopped jumping when someone knocked on the door. The credit monitoring company sent their final report showing everything was back to normal. They'd set us up with fraud alerts for the next 2 years and would notify us immediately if anyone tried to use our information. We were more careful about shredding documents and not posting too much on social media, but we weren't living in fear anymore. Detective Rivera called on a Tuesday afternoon to update us on Ashley's case. She'd accepted the treatment program deal and would be monitored by the court for the full 18 months. She had to pay us back for everything she'd stolen, though it would come in small monthly payments since she didn't have much. The important thing was she had to stay at least 500 feet away from us in our home. That Friday night, Kenna and I made pasta together in the kitchen like we used to before all this happened. We were chopping vegetables and she accidentally squirted tomato juice on my shirt and we both started laughing. Later, we watched some dumb reality show on the couch, and I realized it was the first completely normal evening we'd had in over 2 months. No talking about the case or checking locks or looking over our shoulders. Just us being us again. Sitting there with Kenna's head on my shoulder, I thought about Ashley in that treatment center. The anger I'd felt for weeks had faded into something else. She was sick and desperate and had done a terrible thing, but maybe now she'd get the help she needed. We were going to be okay, and hopefully she would be too someday. All right, that's a wrap on today's little journey. Really appreciate you hanging out and wandering through all this with me. Hope to see you back here again soon. Like the video, it helps more than you think.